Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Working Together series live from the Netiv Zoom room in Houston, Texas. I'm just having a chat with our friend Rod Bryant down there, and I see Rabbi Ingber just came into the room. So let's just jump right in and say hello. Shalom, Rabbi Ingber. So good to be with you again. And Rod Bryant, I got you guys up in a split screen since there's only a few of us at the moment. Yeah, so I'll turn the class over to you, Rabbi.
Okay, very good. Let me just get myself situated. Hold on one second, please. Let me close the door. Give me one split second. I apologize. Okay, how are we doing? Oh, we got a
Outstanding.
small class today.
Yes, we do.
Just
Well,
us? All right.
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, interesting. I didn't send it to my other group. I just mentioned it to them now, so we'll see if they join. Interesting for especially what I wanted to talk about today, which was to allow group participation. So
Yeah.
Rod and Dan, you guys are really going to be the ones that are going to dictate the class now. My plan was, as we did last week, was to basically give the first 10 questions and try to turn them into a class on the spot, God willing.
Right.
So it's us and whoever else joins.
We've
I'm
got
sorry,
David Donahue with us, and Nathaniel from Indianapolis is here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, good. So let's get rolling, guys. So what I want to do is what I said last time, which is I want to get to know your questions. So we're going to go the same thing. We have a few minutes, so maybe some other people show up. The first 10 questions, let's hear what they are, and then I'll try to tie them together as one presentation. Okay, so who wants to start? Who's got any question that's on their mind that they are thinking about, they're concerned about, they want to know? Anything.
Wow.
Actually, I'm probably going to answer it, but we'll see. And we'll try to tie it together as one class. Let's see what do you got.
Yeah.
Who's first? Rod, you got a question, a thought?
Well, I do have a content thing to bring up. You know, we're in the Parsha, as Rabbi Wolbe so aptly mentioned this morning. You know, it's the details of the laws of sacrifice, et cetera, purity, and they seem to very lofty. And for many, you know, we're just so disconnected from the idea of the intricate details of sacrifices and what they should do that we sometimes forget the universality of those things, those universal wisdom principles that are found all throughout the Torah that are not readily available to the reader. They just get caught up in the minutia of the text. And it's, you know, you bring this forward, you wash this, and you don't do that, and you do that. And they forget that there's a universal message of wisdom that teaches us about Hashem from these very seem to be mundane laws, but they're not mundane laws at all, right? It really teaches us things from a higher level. So I guess the question would be is, what do we need to do in examining text to find the universal knowledge or wisdom in all the text so that we make it personal, we make it something to help us grow and develop, etc. So just thought I'd throw that out
all right. So I guess I'll take your question and I'll talk about specifically because this week's parsha Bahar wasn't so much sacrifice. This week's parsha was the laws of Shemitah, but last week's parsha, which was about sacrifices, or about the Kohanim, about sacrifice to a degree, but the Kohanim and their Tahara and their holiness. How does that connect to us? I'll make it relevant. Okay, good.
Right.
Got that. One. What else we got? We're going to do 10 questions. Everyone, first 10, and we're going to try to get the whole class, see if they'll be all an interconnected weaving idea.
Yeah. Anybody have any suggestions, questions, or comments that you'd like to bring up that you want the rabbi to
on anything? Feel free.
On anything. Yeah.
We'll see if we can tie it together. If I feel I can't tie it, then I'll just answer it separately. God willing. All right, what else we got? David, shoot.
So we recently started reading Sefer HaYashar, to kind of fill in some of the gaps in Torah, where you don't get maybe the full narrative of what's happening in the stories. So it's a very interesting book, Sefer HaYashar. So I was wondering, like, what, there's other books out there, like the Book of Enoch. What is the Jewish understanding of the Book of Enoch?
Okay.
Some of these extra biblical, extra canonical, you might say.
Got it. Second question. What are we at with the books that are not put into the Tanakh? Very good. 2. All right, guys, let's get to 10 questions here. And we'll see if we can tie it together. So the first question is the relevance of the offerings today. Second question is, how do we understand the books that are not canonized into the Tanakh? What else? What else? Anything. Let's see if we can tie these together.
I like the pressure.
It's up to you, people. Dan, I didn't get your question exactly. Question was, can Noahide study, what do you mean by a codifier? I didn't know what that means exactly.
What's
about
a codifier? You know how Noahides have a general Torah study prohibition somewhat,
right?
And but right. I find that the codifiers in say the Talmud and things of that nature that actually help us understand, the left or right way in situations are very relevant for daily living. And so my question being, are Noahides allowed to study such things to get to the bottom? I mean, when you look at, say, the modern day court judge, I mean, they're supposed to be schooled in law, but more than schooled in law, understand the bedrock behind the case per se.
It's case law. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the codifier, you mean like the book of the Shulchan Aruch, the book of Code of Jewish Law? Is that what you mean?
Not specifically, but anything that's in, say, sacred material to help us understand, say, why Hashem has said, this is the right way and that is not the right way. Okay.
I will try to answer that too, God willing. So far we got what is the study, especially for Noahides, in terms of studying the codification of laws, what makes one thing okay and one thing not okay, understanding sacrifices relevance, and understanding the books that do not fit into the Tanakh. Okay, great, good. I'm trying to tie these things together. Okay, let's get a few more questions and see if we can tie them all together. What do we got? Got 3 so far. He's gonna forget the 10. We're gonna 5.
Next time we come into the class, we'll have our questions.
That's right. Yeah. Right. So Dan, next time we're gonna advertise like that. When it comes in with your questions, first 10 is gonna be the class, God willing. Okay, we got 3 so far. Let's get just 2 more. 2 more questions.
There's only 3 people. 5. Of course, we could have multiple questions, I guess.
Yeah, you got more than one question.
I've got a question about just what's happening in Israel now. I hear you're in Israel, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Just got back. Yeah.
The latest in Gaza. What we may not be hearing. From the media. I'd love to get an update on that.
Okay, good. That's 4. An update. Naomi, we're taking questions. We're having questions on anything. First 5 or 10. We'll do 5 today, and we try to tie them together as a class. So everyone got a question on any topic. We'll see if we can tie them together.
We could pick on Naomi, have her give a question.
No pressure, Naomi, but it's all on you.
No pressure.
I'm thinking if I come up with one, I'll let you know.
Okay, all right. One more. We need one more question on anything. Make it easy. Make it hard. Can't say I'll answer, but I'll do my best.
The implications of Netanyahu and the ICC.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we got really 2 different schools going on here. We have the 5 questions we got. See how I can tie these all together. because they're really now going in different directions. We got the three questions. One was the relevancy of the offerings in the parsha for us today. Then we had the question about the books that are not in the Tanakh. Good. Then how we relate to those books. Then we had the question of understanding what things to learn, why certain things are permissible, certain things are forbidden, the codification of law, especially for Noachites. Question 3. Question 4 is how do we understand the situation now in Israel? And question 5 is in the ICC's situation with trying to make Netanyahu a war criminal. Okay. All right. So let's try to combine these things in a particular way. Okay. Let's understand a little bit the role of human beings in this world. Human being was the last thing created. Really, the truth is it was the first thing and the last thing created. The soul of man is the first thing, and the body of mankind, humankind, is the last thing created. Now, why is that? Well, because on one hand, the human being is the pinnacle and the beginning and the starting point of everything. The soul of human beings is the highest thing created in the world. The world is created for the human being. And therefore, the human being is also the last thing created. Because why? Because it's like a crescendo. Everything in creation is giving its component, some aspect of its being to the human being. When God creates all the different things in the world, they all have a specific purpose that they are for, but they're all going to be used by human beings to raise the world, elevate the world, or God forbid, to sink the world, to make the world in a negative place, which is why the Talmud says, if a person is if he does the right thing, he is considered to. It's the verse in the Torah. Actually, it says, "Redu." God says to the man, to Adam and Eve, "Redu." To redu can mean the word to rule over the creations of the world. But redu is a funny word. It also means to go down, to descend. And the sages say because if you merit, you become the pinnacle of creation. But if not, you are lower than all of creation. Because everything creation does what it's supposed to do. Everything has its function. And a human being can elevate everything and use it for a greater purpose. But if they don't do that, they are taking themselves down and all of the world too. And that's why you get these people, these PETA people who they have a problem with people with animals and they think animals are people. No. But let's give them maybe, I don't want to say the benefit of the doubt because their minds are very confused. But the idea they have, which they have a fair question, how do I know that I can go and kill an animal and eat it? It's a fair question. And the truth is, it's not so simple. The sages say there is an element to do this. It's allowed. We know in the Noachide commandments, Adam could not eat animals. And Noah was given the ability to eat animals. And the sages tell us because the animals were on a higher spiritual level, as the old creation was, the time of Adam, and there was nothing to fix up with the work of ingesting the animals. By the time of Noah, the world had fallen, and there were certain things that a person could do when they eat the animal to elevate the animal. Now, what do I mean by that? This I call Jewish ecology. Okay? Ecology people understand as the idea of an interconnection of all things in creation. Well, that's true. I don't know if you realize this, but the Jewish law that is forbidden to destroy something. This apparently would go for Noachides also large, and it's not one of the 7 Noachide laws. You can't just break things. Guys, this is my stuff. I want to break it. How could you break it? It's destruction. God gave it to you. And on a deeper level, every single thing in the world is meant to be used in a particular way. And the deepest way we do that is through actually our eating. Our eating. When you go and you ingest something, we know people have the saying, you are what you eat. And we all know that's true. When you eat something, you actually feel a different energy. I mentioned this to you before. I used to live in Manhattan. I used to live in New York City. And I remember there were these two restaurants, two establishments across the street from each other in Greenwich Village. I went to school in NYU, so that was near where I lived. There was two places. One was called McSorley's Bar and Grill. And the other one was called the Eden Health Food Restaurant. And you would see people coming out of these two establishments, right? The guy coming out of McSorley's, they had a good steak. He was like, I want to get into a brawl. And the guys coming out of the Eden Health Food Restaurant would be like, I want to become one with the world, one giant alfalfa sprout, right? Two different energies. Because you are what you eat, which is the root of the idea of kosher. And the Jewish people can only eat certain things that is going to be relevant to their abilities. And the Noachites also have a certain limitation. The limitation of the 7 Noachide laws of eating an animal before it has been completely severed and killed, called Evim and Achai, is a statement of tremendous barbarism. Tremendous cruelty to animals. And there are people that do it today, by the way. They eat the animal because it tastes better when it's like, just still alive. They eat, I don't know, monkey brains while they're alive. It's very weird stuff. But it's cruel. So when you ingest something, it becomes part of you. Now, I want to explain because it becomes part in the deepest way. What happens is that we know scientifically the food you eat then turns into your cells, right? It actually, the nutrition becomes, as divided up, there's a process of separation when you take the good out and remove the bad, which is a process I've told you about that's very, very important. It's the process that's happening right now in the world, where people are choosing for good and bad. That's the human obligation. Whose obligation is to look at the world and to separate true from false. Now moving into Nathaniel and Bob's point about Netanyahu and what's going on in the world right now. So what happens is you have to separate that. You have to look and say, this is true and this is false. That's the same process of eating. But eating is a very powerful process. That's why it's not an accident. The first sin in humanity was through the process of eating. That Adam and Eve ate something they weren't allowed to, because eating is a very, very powerful process when done correctly. It is the process that we're supposed to do in all of our actions to separate the good from the bad, because very often they're mixed together. I always give the example, something like, and this is a very deep mystical concept, to say it in a very relevant way, but everything in the world that you're allowed to use can be used for good or for bad. So, for example, your iPhone. In Israel, in most religious communities, they do not allow cell phone usage. Smartphones. They don't. And why is that? Because we know what happens to smartphones. You're going to give a smartphone. Ooh, where's he going? What's he doing? It's dangerous stuff. They have filters. Noachide should search out for filters also. They have places in America. They provide filters that kids can't get into certain places. You can't get into certain places. Now, at the same time, I'm in Israel now. I have a few books behind me. In my house in America, I have probably over 2,000 books. I got a few books here. On my phone now, I can pull up any Jewish book I want in 2 seconds. So I mean, I could use the phone for good or for bad. I use things for good. When Adam was created as the pinnacle of creation, he had to take everything in the world and use it for good. And that's why I always tell you, when he was created, it said he looked at all the creations and he sang one of the Psalms that he wrote called the Chun Hashem. Come, let us sing praises to God. He looked at all the animals and all the things in the world, and he says, this can be used for the service of God. And that's the same thing when you eat. You have no right to eat an animal, to act like an animal. And that way, Peter is right. Because if you can eat a steak and act like a cow, then maybe you shouldn't do that. Who said you should do that? If you're going to eat a steak and now you have some strength to do some good things in the world, good. You're separating the positive energy from that and pushing out the negative. This is the idea of what the deeper spiritual ecology means, that everything must be used for its spiritual purpose. I always tell people this. If you go and you take an axe and you chop down a tree, you make paper, and the paper, you write on it beautiful words of goodness and kindness and wisdom, then you have elevated the tree. You have taken the materials that God has given in the world for mankind to use, and you have used it. You have now elevated the tree. Like when you eat the food, you've elevated it to be a higher being. But if you chop down that tree and you take that paper and you write words of hate and terrible, terrible things, you're a tree killer. Not only did you do the bad thing that you went and you write the terrible things, but you destroyed something in the world that had a purpose and that was waiting to be used in a certain way. In a certain way, this is a very deep, deep understanding what the offerings are. Now we're answering Rod's question. Because what happens is everything's be elevated to become used for a spiritual purpose. That's why the translation in Hebrew of sacrifice is a bad term. It's not really the right term. The word korban is to bring you close. So, for example, when the person sees the animal and they, let's say, for example, they bring offerings for many things. They bring offerings from when they sinned. So they say, the person says they broke away from God. They really should be cut off and destroyed and killed. But God is giving them a vehicle to say, this animal, it should have been me, but God wants me to live. And I feel I'm giving myself through the animal. And that elevates the animal. Same thing, the person can bring an offering for Thanksgiving. They can feel, I want to connect my body, my soul to God because he gave me this great kindness. But God does not want the person to go and to be a human sacrifice to give his life because he could do many, many things. The animal, the tree have a specific function. The human being has an infinite amount of functions that they can do. And therefore, when the person takes the aspect of the offering, whether he's taking the salt, the inanimate, whether he's taking the barley and the wheat, which is the vegetable kingdom, or he's taking the animal, and he's now saying that these are vehicles for me to elevate that are my connection to God. He's actually doing the greatest goal of these animals they want. Same thing when you eat. When you eat, you're now helping the animal and the inanimate. You put the salt on and the vegetable, because you're making it part of the human being. And that's why the Talmud says that somebody who gives the sages food and drink, and he's like he's bringing an offering on the altar. What does that mean? Because the whole idea of the offerings is to see the world as an interconnected function, that everything has a place, but the human being is the only one that can do it all. A turtle has a shell to protect it, and a bull has horns to gore, but only a human being can make a sword and a shield. And that's why the Mussar rabbis say an amazing thing. They say that everything in creation, since we were made last in creation, every quality there is in the world you possess. So, for example, Dan mentioned codification. The first law in Jewish law is to wake up like a lion. Wake up in the morning with alacrity. But it says wake up like a lion. It doesn't say wake up with alacrity. It says wake up like a lion. Why? Because you got to picture it. So you got to picture how does a lion get up? That power is in the world, but it's not a much deeper point. That power is in me. That power is in you. You could have the power of a lion. You could take all of the things in creation and elevate them. You could reject the negative parts of the creation. The lion today is considered a toref, a predator, which we know from Isaiah that in the future, the predatory animals will no longer be There'd be herbivores. That is, by the way, why one of the reasons why in Jewish law, what the laws of kosher are, we don't need any predatory animals. It's one of the rationales. The split hoofs means that they do not go and pounce and kill their prey. And the chewing their cud, which is the other sign for kosher food, means that the animal is content with a little bit. Right? You see the cow eats a little bit of grass, spends the whole day chewing it up and re-chewing it. It's a little disgusting, but the point is, he takes a little bit and he's happy. So it's traits that we have to develop. So everything we eat is that. So the understanding now is the relevance of the offerings is that this same process has to happen all the time to all of us. We have to go and we have to use the world in a way that elevates it. We don't have the offerings today, which was the highest elevation. But if you go and you eat food and then you do good things, you are actually elevating the food. It's become part of you. You take an iPhone, you do good stuff, you're elevating that. Everything in the world is there to be elevated in a certain way. Now, we've answered Rod's question, hopefully. Let's get to David's question. Now, with that, we can understand a little bit what happens. David's question was, why are certain books how do we look at the books that are canonized and not canonized in the Tanakh? And again, it's like this. The people need to have the ability to understand how to take from the world and elevate it. But there are different abilities, different rationales, different things that God put into the world. The books that made it into the Tanakh are the books that are written with godly input. Okay? And therefore, they have a different level of understanding. This we couldn't have known. This was the men of the Great Assembly, they included prophets, who canonized that these are 24 books of the Tanakh. This wasn't even a discussion at the time, because the book of Esther, for example, was a whole discussion. Is this one of the holy books? They had to find a proof within the Torah to know that it was. And the rabbis had a whole discussion with Esther and Mordechai, where Esther showed them from the Torah itself, it's a hint, this will be one of the books. So the way we relate to the books that are not in the Tanakh is similar to where we push out some food and we elevate some food, right? Similar. The books that are of the Tanakh, those are elevated to be in the status that they are God's word, and every aspect about them has complete truth. The ones that are not, so what those are is they may have ideas of wisdom. It's a book that's actually quoted in the Talmud a lot. It's called Ben Sira. It was actually written by Jeremiah's son, and it was a book of popular wisdom. A lot of it was very, very smart, but it wasn't divine, and that's a big difference. So a book could be, but a smart book in the world today, it's human understanding, and it's very limited, and it's going to be good for a couple of years, and then, like I mentioned this before here, when I raised my kids, Dr. Spock was like the book we use. I don't know anyone's old enough here to remember who Dr. Spock is, but it was, yeah. But today, I think they would call that child abuse. I don't know. Let your kids scream until they fall asleep. How could you do that? You're giving the kid he's going to have all these problems. Oh, look at that. See that? Wow. I guess I got rebuked now from my rabbi. Picture of my rabbi. Son pulled up for me. Okay. So now what is so that's the second point. So we have to understand which books, the books that are in the Tanakh, those are books that are godly, they're divine. That means that no matter how you slice it, it's always going to be true, right? Like a holographic image, or like, they find, we don't know where Mount Sinai was, because Mount Sinai was not a place that kept its holiness. It was a temporary holiness. It was a holiness in the desert for the time. Once God's presence left, it was not. So we don't know where Mount Sinai is. It's not. We don't try to. But there is a place in the desert, in the Sinai desert, where you may have seen this. But they have these rocks. You ever seen these rocks? And we know that Moshe when God spoke to Moshe from the burning bush, from the sneh, this bush, it was on Mount Sinai. Right, the first time, a year before they left Egypt. They have these rocks there, and any way you cut them, when you cut them, inside there's an image of a bush. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that? It's very cool. I saw it once. And every time you cut the rock, no matter what you do, somehow this rock has an image of a bush. It's really a very wild thing. So people say that must be where it is. Okay, could well be. When you talk about the books of the Tanakh, it's going to be true on every single level, on a mathematical level, on a prophetic level. On every level, you will find everything in there because it's connected to godliness, and it's always true. A book that is even a wise book that was not put into the Tanakh means that it could have wisdom, but it's a human insight, which will be, by definition, limited and flawed. So you have to really be careful about that. Like even the book of the Hashmonaim, the story of Hanukkah, already the Tanakh was canonized, and we don't consider that to be a book that was able to, the wisdom could be transmitted through the written word. The story of Hanukkah has to be transmitted through the oral word. While the book of Esther was still, the writing of the book was divinely directed, that to the degree that it's in writing. It's in writing. The godliness experience is in the writing of the book, as opposed to when a person writes, okay, I got a good idea. Okay, good. Question 2. Now, Dan's question, we'll try to see if we could connect this also in the same flow. Dan's question about the codification, understanding which things, why certain things are okay and why they're not okay. So, like this, we don't, like I gave you the example before about the eating the kosher food that Jews have to do. Non-Jews are not obligated to eat non-kosher food, but they are forbidden from eating Aver Min HaChai, an animal that would really affect their being very, very negatively. And that really is the bottom line of why certain things are this way, why certain things are that way. And it's really impossible to know unless you know the whole system, meaning that God, who created all creations, created everything, will say this creation has this sensitivity, that sensitivity, is made it this way, made it that way. We don't know these things. Science is finding out certain things. When they get to the brain, they're lost, because it's already they have some ideas, but the amount of information you're holding is not the physical size of your brain. Right? That's the size of the computer. So what happens is, and it's obviously it's a connection to something much, much beyond that. So it's not simply the gray matter, but science doesn't know. It will never find out certain aspects of the real deeper part of a person. It's not even on the physical aspects. I mean, very often the things that, if you find that medical science will say certain things are healthy, they often retract them 10 years later. We saw it in a vacuum. We didn't see the whole thing. We didn't know what the point of this organ was. We thought it had no point. Oh, years later they find that there is a point for it. So they don't always know. So what happens is God says certain things are appropriate for this individual. Certain things are appropriate for that individual. This person can do that. This person can't do that. Now, Why did God set it up that way? Very good question. God doesn't need anything from us. The reason why he set it up this way is because the Medrash says, I'm not making this up, it says that does God care whether or not you slaughter the animal from the front to the back, for kosher meat? No, but he's doing it to purify the creations, meaning that there is a way that every individual has to function for them to be able to develop a connection to God. It's not that God needs anything. God forbid, doesn't need anything. That's contrary to the most basic understanding of God's perfection. It doesn't need. It's impossible. But rather, he wants to give us good. To give us good, he has to tell us, this is good for you. This is going to develop sensitivity in you that's going to make you a good person. When that happens, you will now be able to experience me because you will be a holier person, a better person, a more righteous person. And so therefore, the codifications, the laws are what comes down to understand how you act in this world in a way that's going to elevate you. Now, a Noahide should learn the laws that relate to him. The laws that don't relate to him is where the prohibition lies, because, as we said many times, a Noahide that learns the 7 laws of Noah, he's a high priest of Israel, it says, because he's doing his particular function. But why am I learning a function that has nothing to do with me? So the Noahide laws, and that's why a lot of times things we speak about might not be found exactly in the Noahide laws, but I speak them to you because this is Torah wisdom that we're saying is relevant to everyone. Okay, that the idea that I shared with you before, that on Rod's question about the sacrifices, was very relevant because it gives you all the deeper understanding on how you have to look at the world. I have to look at the world in what am I taking from the world and how am I using the world to elevate myself and the world. How am I making the world more godly? I'll make myself more godly. So that concept is relevant for everyone. So that's the codifications, the laws that we learn, the halacha that we learn, is how do I interact in this world to maximize myself and my particular relevance and influence to the components of the world that surround me. Okay. We've answered the first 3 questions, which are all on the ideas that I am building here, which is the concept of the individual, the human being, the greatness of mankind, and the requirement of mankind to separate the bad, push out the bad, and elevate the good, and to make the world. He's the pinnacle of creation. Humanity is the pinnacle of creation, and therefore we are obligated to go and to take the world and to use it, and that will make us better and make the world better. God could have made the world perfect from the beginning, but then what would we be doing here? What's my job? My job is to make myself God-like so I can experience Hashem. Right? That's my job. When I do that, I experience God because I become more God-like by going and doing what God does. The story in the Torah starts with God giving clothes to Adam and Eve when they fell and burying Moshe at the end. It starts with kindness and ends with kindness. The whole thing. God is giving to us. He's loving us, he's giving to us, and we have to emulate God in all of those ways. And the understanding that we have, both from the offerings and from even the books that are acceptable and from the laws, is how to interact with this world. And now that brings us to what Bob and Nathaniel asked about the world today. Now, so again, it really is everyone sort of picking their role. And when you look at the ICC, you obviously see a bunch of hypocrites. I mean, to try to say, oh, we want the head of Hamas because he's a terrorist, and we want Netanyahu because he's trying to kill the terrorists. It's totally a bluff. I gotta tell you, it's so funny. It's not funny. It's just sad. But if Israel wouldn't have done anything, they never would have. They never would have even prosecuted the head of Hamas, because it would have been very good for them. They just have to now because it would look too obvious, look ridiculous, The Nazi is coming to kill the person defends himself. Now you say you're blaming the person who's defending himself against the Nazi. So it would look so outrageous. So they're hiding behind the facade of goodness. But it's a joke, not a joke, it's a terrible joke. But remember, the Nazis, before they started the Holocaust, they forbade ritual slaughter of the animals, which I have a friend and a medical person who could document how it's the least painful way for the animal to go. A friend of mine who has the rabbi who has a presentation, he shows you how it's the least painful way to go. Once the trachea and the windpipe are severed, then the pain changes. It doesn't feel the pain, so it's the least painful way for the animal to be. But the Nazis decided that it was cruel to the animals, and that was one of the things they initiated before the killing of 6 million Jews and millions of other people. So how do you explain that? It's obviously not real. It's obviously not real. It's obviously complete window dressing. You're an evil person, and you are presenting yourself in a certain way. And that's what the ICC is. ICC is justice. There's no justice. No justice. But they present themselves that way. So what does it mean? I don't think it's going to mean anything. I don't know what it means for Netanyahu where he goes. I don't know if it's going to affect where he travels. I don't. Maybe it will. But, the reality is, it's funny because somebody just asked my wife, what they think about Netanyahu here. And I mentioned this last week, but it's a message for Chuck Schumer. Really, Netanyahu is more viewed as a leftist now than ever. He's not a right-winger. He's calling himself maybe central. I don't know, a centrist. But the reality is that finally the left wing in Israel is starting to wake up, which may be happening in America too, which is why they got to find another thing to throw in Donald Trump. They got to get him, they got to lock him up, because people are starting to say, wait a minute. If you tell me men are women, women are men, and that's wrong, everything you're telling me is wrong. What's the big lie? That the lab leak that came from a bat, that the NIH wasn't funding it, that you put the vaccines and you lied about that. Well, which conspiracy theory do you want to go to right now? So everybody call it conspiracy theorists, but every conspiracy theory that you said, which and again at the time, and I remember, and I said, I think I told you this at the time, when they said the lab leak theory was ridiculous, was conspiracy. I was like, the telltale sign was the fact that you couldn't say it. That's the sign of the brainwashing, because I followed a simple Talmudic dictum. There are facts of majority. If I have a majority of something and then something comes out, I say it came from the majority, most likely. That's simple. If I have two things, one is it's near one to the other, then it's more likely to be next to the thing it is. So if you tell me that there's a lab in Wuhan studying coronaviruses, I mean, you got to be a moron not to say that's your first assumption. I mean, I don't understand how maybe it didn't, but that should be certainly a valid theory. No, you can't think that. You can't think that. So what happens is that the world is saying black is white, white is black, up is down, men are women, women are men. Everything is all wrong. So they talk about Netanyahu here. The left the leftists in Israel have had, as I told you before, one of their greatest shakeups. I don't know if it'll last. I don't know if it'll last because without Torah, it doesn't last. It's not about left and right. It's not about politics. The politicians are not the ones that are providing anything other than they are the vehicles for what reality we're creating. When we're tolerant of a society that could do such terrible things and could mutilate children and say it's okay, and we tolerate it, so we're setting ourselves up for bad people to take control. So the politicians are not the cause, they're the effect. They really are. They're the effect. And that's why, democracy is not a panacea. It's not, because Hamas was democratically elected, but it's a telltale sign of what your society is about. If most people support terrorism, then the people of Gaza are terrorists. They support terrorism. That's what they're, even if they personally can't do it, but they all say the same thing. They all want to do it. So they elected terrorists. In America, half the country, a lot of country supports, a lot of country doesn't know. I mean, they're really unfortunately been brainwashed. That's why it's the dangerous situation. But reality is that the deeper understanding is the politician is not the cause; he's the effect. He's the effect of the spiritual creation of the people, as I told you earlier, and that's how we're tying this whole class together from all the pieces we've talked about. The product is what are we making the world into? When the world is being spiritually elevated, people get understanding. The leaders they get are people that are wise. When people project stupidity, they get, I mean, I hate to say it because, we respect, God told Moses to act with Pharaoh, give honor to the kingship. It's very hard it's terrible to say, but what does it say about a country whose leader is obviously mentally incapacitated? What does it say? You know what it says? I hate to say it, but it says the people are mentally incapacitated. I know that's a rough one, Dan. That's going to go up in the in some of the politically incorrect ones there, but it's true. Stop reading the Facebook posts. And you're getting your information from some two-liner from the river to the sea. I don't know a river. I don't know what sea. It doesn't matter. Like this is okay. So you don't know anything. You don't know anything. The Jews have never been here. What religion are you, sir? Well, I don't know. I'm a Christian. Well, so where do you think that your God was born? Hello. What religion was he? I mean, I don't understand. You don't know anything. The Muslims don't believe that either, by the way. The Muslims, if you get an honest imam, he will tell you, and you can find some of these guys online, he will tell you, Jerusalem, Israel is for the Jews. He will tell you that. He will say in the Quran, 700 times Mecca, 350 times Medina, Jerusalem, 0. Okay, so someone has a myth that Muhammad went to there. That's not. I don't know. I'm not an Islamic scholar, but Islamic scholars say that can't be. The Dome of the Rock, which was built as a shrine and a dedication to the Temple of Solomon, that was built much later. So okay, this place, I don't know, but it's ridiculous. So what happens is that what's happening in Israel is, God willing, now I haven't seen it, I just arrived, and I hope it doesn't fade out. But what happens is that Netanyahu wasn't really right. He was a center right, he was called before. Now what's happened is that the left of Israel got a wake-up call. Because what happened was that the people that were killed in Gaza, I should protect this, were the biggest supporters of Gaza. They were their friends. I mentioned many times. It's how they knew where they wrote down. They were in their house. They took care of them. They were helping them. They literally turned them in. They wrote it. They found the notes that the terrorists came in, and the guy who they went and they were feeding him and bringing him in and giving him medical help and giving him work. Because what they do, they took a beautiful land and they turned it into a garbage disposal with tunnels. They spent billions of dollars. I mean, can anyone even fathom this? Can anyone fathom what's happening in inflation? And you've just spent millions of dollars to build this bridge to give the humanitarian aid to the terrorists that are trying to destroy you? It's like, where's America's money going to? I mean, the guy in Argentina, he changed the inflation system. He brought it down to 85% in 3 months. He said, and someone needs to give the present administration a sort of basic course in economics. I don't think the basic course. You can't keep throwing money, you can't keep printing money and not have inflation. I mean, so they're supporting all these things. Now, so what happens is that the left in Israel sort of moved now, and they are starting to realize this is not real. Will it last? I don't know. Why do I not know that? Because politics is politics, and truth is truth, and they're not the same thing. When the leftists of Israel move away from their left creation, which is actually an anti-Torah creation. And it's the same thing for Chuck Schumer and the left Jews in America. They're trying to make a new religion. That's what it is. It's another religion. And they believe that their religion, because they really want to do good, it says in the Bible many times, 46 times I believe it is, it says, do not oppress the stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. And the Talmud says, any blemish that's in you, don't go seeing on other people. Don't go and hire Russia to get a dossier and then go say that other guy is colluding with Russia. Every single thing, if you look at every single thing that has been accused in one side, it's amazing. It's a phenomenon that people with their own problem they project it on others. And Torah says you were exiled, you were strangers in Egypt, you were slaves in Egypt, and you got to be sensitive to the downtrodden. And Jews have always been sensitive to the downtrodden, always. And that's what Hitler hated so much. He hated the idea of helping the downtrodden. So now you have these woke bullies who now make it that the more downtrodden, that means you're right. If you're downtrodden, you're right. You're a terrorist. You're just a losing terrorist because you're a loser, because you just bomb people, you don't build anything, but you're down, so you must be right. You're not educated, so we got to give you the job. You don't know what you're doing, so we're going to tell you you're on top. So because of this, so unfortunately, that's a new religion. It's the religion of the left. And unfortunately, there are Jews who are part of that religion. And in Israel, too, there are Jews who are part of the left. Now, they have gotten a wake-up call. And that's why I tell you, Netanyahu is not even, like if Chuck Schumer had his idea of getting rid of Netanyahu, the next guy coming in is hopefully a lot more right. A lot more right, Netanyahu is trying to balance, he's center a little bit. He's trying to balance because the other people said, no, just go in and flatten it. This was Nazi Germany. You have to flatten the place. That's what they were calling for. I saw an Israeli news discussion. It was very interesting. It was right after October 7th. They had this guy. His name is Moshe Feiglin. He's a politician, and he was he was running as a libertarian, and they thought he was going to do very, very well in the last election, and he did. And sort of backed out. But he's an intellectual, a very smart guy, and had a lot of good ideas. And he's been telling them for years. He was a member of the Likud party, which is the same party as Netanyahu. And he's telling them for years. He was saying, "What are you doing? These people are going to. You're You pulled out of Gaza. They're just going to build terror things. They're going to come and attack us, and what are you doing? This is not a solution. And they blew him off for years. Then I saw they had him on TV afterwards, and there was a lot of I guess more leftist Israeli news reporters were interviewing him, and they were saying, "Okay, we admit it, you were right. Well, what do we do now?" I said, "Bomb the place." They said, "What?" They flatten the place. I said, "What did you do that? Did you do that?" I said, "What do you mean? How can you do that? I mean, how can you do that? You walked in. If you have a house, it's your home. You built your house, and you invite someone and you let him stay in your basement, and then he starts trying to take over the whole house, and he tries to kick you out of the house. He tries to kill you. What are you going to do? You're going to take him by the scruff of his neck and you're going to throw him out of there. What are you doing?" And they couldn't get it. They couldn't get it. And that's the same thing. So Netanyahu is like, what he is doing is, I mean, to say it's a war crime is bizarre because it's the only word. I mean, it's unfortunate that people die in war. I wouldn't say innocent people because, again, only God decides who's innocent. No one's killed is not going to be killed. So I don't believe in that. But obviously, you don't want to go and kill just to arbitrarily just bomb things. But you got a problem here. First of all, these people, as democratically, have voted and all support this. They all support it. What's it? Probably less than 1% doesn't. And they hide behind the women and children. They do that. So Netanyahu is trying to pinpoint and going and stopping, and it's unbelievable. No one ever would do such a thing. America, we wouldn't do this, right? I mean, just think about it, guys. Just tell me, if Mexico lobbed 500 missiles into America, what would be the situation in Mexico the next day? What would they do? You know what they would do. Any good red-blooded American knows what they would do. So Netanyahu is going. He's pinpointing. He's sending and he's getting Israeli soldiers killed for no reason, because he's so trying to avoid the casualties. Now, is that because of a kindness? Is that because of world opinion? Is that because of politics? Is that because of a misguided sense of what's correct? It's hard to know. It's probably all of the above. I give some benefit of the doubt that, he doesn't want to kill people that he doesn't know to be terrorists. So it's yeah. So the answer to the question really is what's happening in Israel. I haven't seen it because I've only been back in a couple of days from what I saw last time. What I see now is the Israeli people are waking up. And when the left wing wakes up and embraces not their new religion of whatever we want to call it, wokeism or leftism or whatever it is, and they go back to the Torah, when that happens, that will not be forgotten. Here, the longer they drag this war out, which is what Trump said, by the way, and they of course attacked him and said he banned Israel, which was not true. He said he's got to finish up because the pressure of the world was too great. So how long it drags out, I don't know. People could retract. But there is a sentiment now that the leftists in Israel have started to understand, and Netanyahu is no longer even called center-right, it's called center-left. Most people have already switched. Just like Elon Musk correctly said, he drew a diagram once, says, he was called a leftist before, and now he's called right-wing. Well, he didn't change. Just everyone changed the other way. You go listen to Barack Obama talking about, illegal immigration, talking about Biden talking about illegal immigration. They're fire and brimstone against it. And now you're a xenophobe if you're against it. So they're changing the rules here. That is the summary of our situation. So let's just tie it all together with our 5 questions of the day. And therefore, a person needs to understand, I am a human being that has been created in the divine image as the lasting creation, the pinnacle of all of creation. And I need to go and need to take into me what is good and use it and reject what's negative. And that's happening on an individual level. It's like in the offerings, it's happening on an individual level with everything you do. It happens on a spiritual level with which things make it into the holy books, which doesn't. It happens on a political level where the world chooses which side of reality we want to be on, the side of right, or God forbid, the side of negativity. And then that's the side that we need to fight. And eventually that will be destroyed and everyone will see the truth. Okay. Any questions? Did we answer all 5 questions? I think we did. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas?
No.
Any other questions, thoughts, or ideas?
Wow, just wow is all I have to say. Yeah.
Good
well
stuff.
put, Rabbi. Way to tie those 5 points together. Excellent material in there for sure. My mind's blown. But it's kind of, I'd been reading a lot of Rabbi Nachman in the last 6 weeks or so, and he spoke plainly about the way the other side, the Sitra Achra functions, and this wokeism. Yeah, it's a retardation, but all they see is victims and victimizers, and often they get it wrong by calling somebody who's a victimizer, and they call them a victim, and attack anything that's, I've seen it on the streets in my area, like homelessness and drug addiction. And we've recently had to repeal our open drug policy here in my region because when they allowed it, all it contributed to was what they call now street disorder. You get these addicts just, shooting up or smoking heroin wherever they want, setting up camp and making a big mess wherever they go, and robbing businesses, and people don't feel safe to even go in their businesses, and businesses have had to shut down, and all kinds of just mayhem, all kinds of disorder. And so they've repealed they had to get permission from the Canadian government to turn it back. And so now, they no longer had, they were given for, it was a pilot, was supposed to run 3 years, but 2 years in, they've repealed it where the drug addicts were allowed to actually carry like 2.5 grams of heroin or crack cocaine, and sadly you let them do it, and all of a sudden they do it wherever they want, and make a problem wherever
Canada
they want.
allows even like hard drugs also in Canada. Wow.
Well, that
Not
was
just
just here in British Columbia. It wasn't across all Canada. It was only here in British Columbia as a pilot project. And we kind of were given scolding from Oregon because they tried it, and it just ended up with making the situation worse. I mean, sadly, addicts die mostly alone. They overdose alone. They do their drugs alone, and nobody's there. And so the solution from the woke mind was, well, don't let them do it alone. Well, and I work security at a wet facility where, they had a couple safe injection sites and an open aired inhalant room. And, I'm trying to patrol when you're dealing with people who are all whacked out on heroin or fentanyl's a problem, really. But to them, it was the good drugs. And sadly, when you work in a shift and you got 17, 15 overdoses a night, it's nasty, and you're just trying to save the lives. But it's that woke, twisted distortion that you really caught the angle, how it's retardation. But a new religion, you called it what it is. It's a new religion.
Yeah.
But sadly, when they see victims and victimizers, and they inaccurately label the victimizer as a victim and attack who they see as the victimizer when in fact they're the victim, people get it wrong. I mean,
right. Yeah, it's true. And there's reasons why people want to espouse certain things. They have their own biases why they want to see the world a certain way. It's generally not just a mistake. There's a lot of times there's other components to it.
nobody wants to see victims, for sure. or
No, I see that.
oppression.
But for example, like, there are things like, like in terms of, like, Israel thing, the bottom line there is it's Jew hatred. That's what it is. And that's Semitism for the various deeper reasons why it is. So you see the world that way. So the gays are going to be gays for Palestine. It's if it wasn't so sad, it'd be funny. I mean, like, do you know what would yeah, they protested that, in the Gaza, they'd be finished. But so why do they choose these are their friends? It's a sickness. It's creating belief systems, looking at the world and trying to see the world in a certain way, and you don't have a map, and you have your biases, you have whatever the biases you have, like it's funny to me sometimes how some of the wealthiest people support the worst economic policies, and part of it is because they actually are making money on it. Make movie, they know they just make the movie, yeah, make the movie about, whatever wokeism. Every movie's got this person. You know what to do. So Robert De Niro, you're not sitting dealing with the situation the world's dealing with. You have your own, you're in your own world, and so you could feel spiritual and righteous and great because you can talk about the downtrodden, and you're off in your yacht someplace, making more money on the deal. It's not hurting you.
Well, the
So
bottom
people
line,
have biases.
it leads to government dependency, and sadly, when that happens, yeah, like you said, print
That's
more
true.
money you end up with inflation, and
You want the government, two different statements of the rabbis, both in the book of ethics of our fathers. One is altis vadler rishus. Dude, don't buddy up with the government, okay? Like, get the government. You want them as far away as you can, Okay, because. And then the second statement is, Mullah. It says you should pray for the welfare of the government, because if it wasn't for the government, people would swallow each other up whole. They just swallow each other. And the reality is, both those statements are true. The government is needed for protection. So defund the police is the one thing that you should not do. Take so much taxes and try to fix the thing is the other things that's what the government shouldn't do. So what they should do is protect, create laws and not defund the police. Have a system that there's some control, because there are bad actors, bad players. And on the other hand, but they really just love the power, and they're grabbing more and more and more power. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
I don't know.
printing everything into
It's like,
bankruptcy.
it's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know. It's you start to see these things like people like Joe Rogan when they're talking about some of the coronavirus nonsense. But it's like it's years later. Nobody thinks. Nobody cares. But there's a lot of power grab right now, and that's that's what they're trying to do. That's why they're terrified of Trump. Terrified of Trump. He's going to stop democracy, because what were they so terrified about? Because they know that they're creating a censorship reality, and so, like, we can't. We got to think. So it's but the good news is, like I say, politicians are not. They're not the cause. They're the effect. The cause is really us. We got to go and elevate the world. When you elevate the world, it's like, I mean, I hate to say this, but I don't want, but like, everyone's talking about, are they going to substitute Joe Biden for somebody else? And why don't they? The truth is, for the Democrats, Joe Biden is the greatest president ever. He really is, because he is not fully functional. I mean, it's fairly obvious. And the reality is that if you had a person who, like Obama, like, even though he was an ideologue, but he was also a politician. He had to navigate his thing. couldn't really push this because he was against gay marriages in the beginning. That's on record because he didn't think he was his political time. He switched it later. Since President Biden is so he's a career politician, so he doesn't really have ideals. His ideals are whatever is the political soup of the day. So, and he's a politician, so they put him, and now he's not fully functional, so they put him in this direction, and he starts barking. So really, he is like the ultimate person for them because it's the people who are creating this belief system are these no-name people. You don't even know who they are. And they're just, putting them out in front. So, but like I said to you before, it still means that they're the effect, not the cause, because the cause is if the people are going to say, we're not going to tolerate this, then the leaders or the so-called leaders have to go in the lines of the people. Now, this is true in democracy. It's true in not democracy also. I think I mentioned this to you. It's an interesting question. There's a whole question about when Shimon and Levi killed the people of Shechem.
Yeah.
When they killed Shechem, so why were they allowed to kill all the people? Right? That's really a very relevant question to today. Should Netanyahu be going in, trying to pinpoint, target, and find the terrorists? Because Shimon and Levi went and they destroyed the whole city. So what was their rationale? How could they do that? So there's a few different rationales. All are very relevant for this situation. The most non-controversial, really, or whatever, is maybe the Maharal, who says that it was a war. They were not giving up the people who did it. They were not giving up Shechem because he was the leader of the city. They weren't giving him up. They were defending him. So it was a war, and they were able to kill whoever they're going to kill. The second rationale is that since they were fighting back to protect their leader, so now we were defending ourselves. Maybe the most radical position in this really is Maimonides, which seems to say that since they did not go and hold him accountable for his kidnapping and rape, they were party to that. They broke the 7 Noachide laws also, which is very interesting because Nachmanides argues because since the law of setting up court systems is not a negative command, it's a positive commandment, it's not the same thing. But Maimonides understands that since one of the 7 Noachide laws is to set courts of law to enforce the law, and they had to enforce it against their own leader. So they were now breaking the 7 Noachide laws, they were culpable. So according to that, I mean, really, not only which really means, and in a deeper sense, even forgetting Gaza right now, it means when you live in, and that's what's amazing, really, that when Iran, the Iranian people were rebelling against Iran, that they didn't get the help from President Obama. That was bizarre. I mean, that's a weird one because there was a period of time where, we know America does coups all the time. In 2014, they got rid of the Russian supporting Ukrainian government. That was a coup. That was a well-known thing. It's well documented. So they didn't do it. It's amazing. But the reality is that people need to stand up for truth against forget Democratic leaders. Forget Democratic elected leaders. Forget that. Even if it's a ruthless tyrant, the people need to unify and stand up against it. Even then, because if not, then you're condoning it. That's what would come out. Well, that's the summation that we have here right now. I got to get going, guys. It's 12:15. It's a little bit late. We get tomorrow. We're starting our yeshiva again. It was Lag BaOmer. Great holiday, but maybe we'll do it another time. I'm going to keep this format for a couple more weeks. So the next couple
Okay.
of weeks, let's go the
Come back with
questions.
harder questions.
Come back with questions, and we'll take the questions and we'll try to put it together and see if we can unify your questions.
Yes.
All
Don't
right,
forget
fine.
to like and subscribe our content on the Netiv and the World Noahide Center YouTube page.
Oh, Dan, is there any way we can get like some short snippets from the class? I guess some good.
Do you have the software to break it up into small clips?
I don't know if something ever good comes out, then we can grab people with because we
Rabbi,
know
let me try
you
to
guys hang it for an hour, 15 minutes. Attention span is more like 30 seconds for people.
let me look at what I can do. I can take it and AI can divvy it up and I can take a close look at it.
That would be great. That'd be
Okay.
great.
I'll do that, Dan. Right. Sounds good. Yeah. Well, let's start with the current. We'll start with the current ones that we have. Right.
Thank you so much.
Shalom. We're
Yeah.
signing out. I want to say bye to everyone and see you guys Monday evening is Rabbi Rabbi goodness gracious, man. I just lost my Monday night class, 7 p.m. Don't
Zvi,
All
forget.
right. All the best,
Okay.
sir.
Shalom, shalom.
All right. Wow. Well, that was great. I'm sorry I had my mic muted for a little bit there, and I got so many buttons and tabs going, but it's a joy. Excellent session with Rabbi Ingber. I like this format he's doing. Ask some questions up front, and then he's pulling them all together with today's events. And very, very, very useful. We hope you enjoyed it. So we'll aim to be back next week, and Rabbi's in Israel, so I find that he's very inspired when he's there in Israel. So exciting. So till next week, have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody. Bye for now.